Transformacja gospodarcza. Ostatnie 2 dekady to z jednej strony dynamiczny rozwój nowych krajów członkowskich Unii, z drugiej spadek gospodarczego znaczenia Unii Europejskiej na arenie międzynarodowej oraz rosnąca konkurencja ze strony państw z innych regionów świata. W obliczu stale rosnących wpływów globalnych potęg Unia Europejska staje przed nowymi wyzwaniami gospodarczymi. To także czas dużych przemian technologicznych, społecznych, klimatycznych, związanych z bezpieczeństwem, które dotyczą całej Unii Europejskiej, ale w różnym stopniu oddziałują na poszczególne państwa i regiony. Fundusze polityki spójności od wielu lat wspierają transformację gospodarczą całej Unii, ułatwiając nam radzenie sobie z nimi. Od ponad 20 lat dzięki polityce spójności możemy uczestniczyć w budowie strategicznej pozycji Europy poprzez wsparcie rozwoju nauki, nowoczesnego przemysłu, transformacji cyfrowej czy zielonych technologii. Polityka spójności, wspierając regiony, wzmacnia całą Europę w transformacji gospodarczej. Zwiększa także bezpieczeństwo i przyczynia się do budowy odporności na potencjalne kryzysy, które w przyszłości mogą dotyczyć państw Unii Europejskiej. Jak stawić czoła nowym wyzwaniom transformacji gospodarczej Unii Europejskiej? Jaką rolę odgrywa w tym polityka spójności? Jakie powinny być jej cele, zasady realizacji, abyśmy wspólnie mogli osiągnąć więcej?
Well, with the morning footage and with this short video, I think it's clear and obvious for all of us that cohesion policy has contributed heavily over the last 20 years to the prosperity of our citizens, regions, countries, and Europe as a whole. Good afternoon, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, distinguished guests, representatives of regional authorities, national authorities, European Commission, dear guests, and entrepreneurs. I hope that there are entrepreneurs among us. My name is Krzysztof Gulda, and I was invited by the Minister of Funds and Regional Policy to run this show today in the afternoon, to chair the session, to ignite the discussion on the future and on the effectiveness of the cohesion policy in the context of transformation of the economy, European economy. Well, just to build a little trust between us, I will try to introduce myself in a few words. I have this privilege to have an experience in a number of different areas, in the so-called triple helix, because I have some history in the research area. My background is in nuclear physics, but then I created one of the first in Poland technology transfer office at the University of Warsaw. And then, quite unexpectedly, I became the civil servant for more than 10 years, being a director of the innovation department and several strategy departments in the Ministry of Economy and Ministry of Science and Higher Education. It took me to the moment when I left public service, and I'm providing different consultancy services for the European Commission, for other international organizations, but in the same time, I'm supporting researchers and students in converting their laboratory results and ideas into the commercial product. I'm the president of the Special Purpose Vehicle, the company which is fully owned by Warsaw University and which is supporting researchers on their way to the market, which supports the new startup deep tech companies. With all this experience together, I may say that sometimes I'm supporting governments to create the complex systems, but on the other hand, sometimes I'm supporting students, researchers, and entrepreneurs on the pragmatic side to fight with this complexity. And this is the kind of the nature we experience everywhere, including within the implementation of cohesion policy, with the big ideas behind, but also with the challenges related to implementation. Although cohesion policy helps to reduce disparities, there are still inequalities in the European Union and between regions which may hamper this prosperity. Positive effects of the cohesion policy are visible, particularly in terms of the economic growth and employment. It was shown on the field. There are certain areas where this is very visible. There was the voting during the morning session, and transport and some other areas were recognized as a more visible place for implementation and success of the cohesion policy. But on the other hand, the regional convergences were slowing. That was also mentioned on the film. The factors like the war on Ukraine or COVID-19 were emerging, and they definitely influenced the way how the cohesion policy is perceived and how other policies, not only economic transition, but policies related to sovereignty, technological sovereignty, raw materials access, and security policy became important on the scene. There were a number of reports published last year. One of the most important, the 9th cohesion report, underlined the importance of the cohesion policy, but also identified certain barriers, certain issues which must be addressed. I think it's worth to recall one of the latest publications from December, the report from the European Parliament Research Service under the title of The Future of the EU Cohesion, Scenarios and Their Impacts on Regional Inequalities. This report explores the different scenarios and possible consequences of different relations between cohesion policy and other sectoral national policies. This is important to understand what might be the costs of non-cohesion policy or the weak cohesion policy in the context of the policy of the economic transition, sovereignty, and security policy. The lack or the weak of the cohesion policy potentially can fueling something which is called the geography of discontent and distancing citizens of the European Union from this big idea. Referring to the economic transition, which is a topic for our panel today, we already heard in the morning that we still believe in green Europe, in a Green Deal. But we also recognize, and these voices were heard, that a Green Deal creates certain complications. It gives a complexity, it raises costs of energy, and opportunities are sometimes balanced or hampered with some negative effects of this policy. And it also may create additional intra-regional or inter-regional tensions and differences, as an impact of the climate change might be very different in different parts of Europe. Saying and discussing the economic transition, obviously we're also discussing the digital transformation driven by the EU digital strategy. The idea is to use as much as possible digital technologies to support the Green Deal, to support security, to support sovereignty, but also for the benefit of citizens, of the companies implementing different tools, different elements which are under the umbrella of this concept. Just yesterday, the Commission has launched with the new impetus, the new document, which was also referred today in the morning, this competitiveness compass. And I think that many of us welcome it very warmly with these three flagship measures which are born or somehow driven by the Draghi report. The first is the closing the innovation gap. So all these initiatives related to startups, to flow of investments, to deep technology, to AI gigafactories, to AI Act, Apply AI, and other similar. The second, which is a joint roadmap for decarbonization and competitiveness, which clearly connects the next generation or the reinforcement of the Green Deal in the context of competitiveness, having this clean industrial deal and an affordable energy plan in place in a few weeks and months. And the third, reducing excessive dependencies and increasing security, which addresses all these problems related to technology and material sovereignty of Europe with the offer of the clean trade and investment partnerships. These three flagships are going to be supported and complemented by five horizontal enablers. And some of them, as it was mentioned today in the morning, are not very new. The first is simplification. The word simplification was already used for many, many years in very, very, very different context. But now there is even more than just simplification, because there is a lower barriers to the single market. There is a financing of competitiveness, promoting skills and quality jobs, and better coordination of policies at the EU and national level with the competitiveness coordination tool and competitiveness fund. Many of these ideas, if you go into detailed documents, sounds like dreams come true. But it was also said in the morning that the actions speak more than words. So we are all awaiting how these concepts, these strategies under the new mandate of the Commission will be implemented. But for the purpose of our discussion, to put these new initiatives in the context of the cohesion policy and economic transformation, I think it's worth to raise one of the key questions for our debate today. How to ensure that the cohesion policy, which is based on the local, place-based, multi-level, and built on trust, how they continue to improve the regional convergences while strengthens the economic transformation of the EU in response to the global challenges and contributes to its sovereignty and security. This is one of the topics I would like to build the discussion later today with the panel. Obviously, in the policy debate, the voice of regions has to be also well heard. And the economic transition poses asymmetric impacts across regions. There is a need for tailored policy measures that consider these disparities to prevent widening gaps and to support regions that are less prepared for the transformation. And this is the topic which could be the subject for the separate discussion, for the separate conference. So from this big issue, I want to focus the discussion today on the smart specialization strategies, which could be the bridge between the regional, local needs and the global challenges and the global big policy issues. That's why we need to focus more on these regional issues, which at the same time could strengthen and could contribute to the global challenges. It seems that there's a clear need for the right identification of the priorities. But the question is, the priorities should be set up bottom-up or top-down. We should receive the big issues and disaggregate them for the local and regional and adapt them to the local and regional needs. Or we should look for the regional strengths or regional gaps and build bottom-up the priorities to create the regional, national, and EU-wide strategies. There is also the clear need to strengthen the ecosystems within the regions, but also across the regions, intra-regional links, inter-regional value chains, and the environment for companies to grow not only on the scale of the city, not on the scale of the country, but the scale of the continent, to create global leaders. That's what we need, and we should start this probably from the cohesion policy perspective as well. And last but not least, it was also heard today how the cohesion policy fit or how can benefit or how it should go hand in hand, as it's stated in the EU Treaty, with the single market. That was an interesting story then when we were developing the concept for the conference and for this particular panel early last year. We were almost close to define for our own purpose, for the purpose of this debate, the fifth freedom as something which is missing in the system. Surprisingly, a few months later, Letta report arrived with that concept. We were proud as a team that it came to our mind even before. Maybe there was a leakage from our team to let an expert group to use this concept. But definitely, there is an issue. There is an issue and the question if the present setup, the present four freedoms are still relevant, are still enough to face all these challenges related to globalization, to the new global setup, to the change of balance of power, to the political change which are rolling across the world. But again, within the single market, we can touch upon a number of different issues. For the purpose of the discussion and to see the right link or to see the right context for the cohesion policy and single market, I would like to focus the discussion on the RDI policies, on research, development, and innovation, as for me, still one of the strongest and the most important driving force, which also could be applied in different regions, not only in the poor, not only in the rich, but this is an issue which could be rightly, in the right way, adapted to all contexts. Why? There's one more thing. If you compare numbers, if you compare the budget of the framework program, if you compare this with the total budget of all regions and spendings on RDI, the numbers are not very different. Obviously, the central budget is larger, but still, more than 60 billion in the previous financial perspectives and more than 60 billion, and in the present financial perspectives, a bit less than 60 billion euro are invested on the regional level in the same priorities or similar priorities or in priorities which in principle should match to each other from the regional perspective and central perspective. Having all this in mind, I want to invite you to the journey for the last hour and a half to discuss this in a group of distinguished panelists and focus on this three dimension, on the three relations between the cohesion policy in the global context, in the regional context, and in a single market context. And all my questions and all contributions from the panel, I hope, will bring us with some new ideas. But to start this, to ignite this discussion, I would like to invite to the stage as a first guest, as a first panelist, Wolfgang Munich, who is a deputy head of unit in the DG Regio, the European Commission. Wolfgang is very experienced in all these issues related to cohesion policy. In the last decade, he has worked closely with Poland, Italy, and Malta, so you are also very well aware about what's happening here. And you have a vast experience in implementing cohesion policy. Since 2023, he was worked in the Smart and Sustainable Growth Unit, where he monitors the relevant sector policies and coordinates the work of the geographical departments in this respect. Is it true?
Absolutely.
Well, Wolfgang, thank you so much that you agreed to start this discussion with me. You know the format. We have to wake up people. This is the session after lunch. This is the worst moment for all speakers because there are certain digestive processes which, you know, what happens with the blood and the tension. Our role here is to wake up the audience, but also to give a little impact and to give a spark to the whole discussion in the panel. So if you allow, in this beautiful picture, I will find certain missing points or gaps.
Absolutely.
And I will be more than happy if you can...
Since you are visionary, so you invented the fifth freedom.
We did not invent it. At least we did not patented this, which is also worth to remember in the context of innovation and research, because maybe if we would find this as a logo for the presidency, that would never happen, that Leta will arrive this later on. So now he has this privilege to be an author of this, and we only work this in our offices. Yeah, but to take this seriously a bit more, obviously there is a lot of positive results. As I mentioned, the cohesion reports provides a number of evidences. But on the other hand, if you go through the number of reports published last year, published in previous year, if you participate in different debates, particularly where research community or entrepreneurs are present, they see certain issues and problems in this nice picture of cohesion policy. If we will just start on this still more global level, how you feel about this problem that, okay, all regions are moving, the convergence continues, but still there are new problems. There are disparities on the regional level. There are disparities between the big cities and agglomerations and the more rural areas. How we can cope with this? What we can offer to the regions or to inter-regional cooperation to bridging these gaps or to provide some new impetus for this development. Is there any chance the Commission has some solution for that?
Well, I mean, you're describing basically the situation that there are some regions advancing, some agglomerations advancing, some fall behind, some stagnate. And I think what we need to do is, because we have these basically three categories, if you want. There is the category where we need to create capacity, create competitiveness, create prosperity. Then we have this category of territories where we need to wake them up because they were stagnating for years, even declining. And then we have the front runners, those who compete with Silicon Valley or other places globally. And we need to still help them a little bit here and there. So these are the huge challenges which we have. And I think what is driving, and Draghi wrote it very clearly in his report, and rightly, I guess, that innovation is the key for productivity increases. We also need to become more, well, we need to become more competitive, because we heard it today in the morning. We are facing challenges which we didn't have before. And of course, we heard of the war, we heard of, but geo-economically, everything is changing. The way we are doing business is changing. We can't rely anymore on these global value chains where you buy in the cheapest place. And this is where you said, well, in your speech, strategic industries. So Europe finally thinks, well, maybe getting rid of steel industry completely is not a good idea. Let's reshore.
Sounds promising, but as it was also mentioned today, so I can cite this again, the devil is in the details. If the innovation are so important, if the regions had the role to play, why we are introducing all these policies in such a complicated way? Why the state aid rules privileging the central instrument against the regional? What regions do wrong that they have to fulfill, and all these companies, researchers have to fulfill this extremely complex framework?
Well, state aid is a tool to create a level playing field. We shouldn't forget this. If you look at who is spending state aid, there are 2 or 3 countries who are spending 2/3 of the state aid because they have the deep pockets. But these countries are not permitted to fund much. So in a sense, Poland has a different state aid regime. Other regions, less developed, they're almost as comparable to the central instruments, with a co-financing rate of 70% at maximum. So state aid is complex, but if we let everyone use their budget as they want, there will be 3 countries which will go ahead unrestrained, and the rest will be left behind. And cohesion is there to give the resources to create this level playing field so that these countries can catch up.
Sounds interesting, at least from the perspective that to catch up, you have to fulfill the more complex rules.
Well, I know it's a hassle. I agree.
At least I think something which we can dig later.
No, I think the general idea is good, but I think in this terms of simplification, one needs to think a little bit on the application.
I like very much the idea which was also delivered during the main session, that simplification maybe is not enough. Maybe the real deregulation or removing simply some rules or some concepts from the legal framework is the right approach. How do you feel about it?
Well, we should really look at certain issues, but it is not only on Europe. Because during my implementation years in Poland and in Italy and in Malta, I saw how long it takes to realize projects. And if you have an innovation project and the selection, an enterprise promising comes and say, I have a brilliant idea, there's the market, I want to go ahead, and then needs to wait 12 months before it gets the grant, the market is gone, they are bankrupt, and the project doesn't make sense anymore.
You touch extremely sensitive.
This is exactly, but this is not only European rules. This is also how national rules are applied.
The gold plating.
The gold plating is one, but even if you have other areas like local doing business conditions. So I'm an entrepreneur, I want to build a production hall. I ask for a building permit. Under the same law, within a country, you have vast differences how fast you get a decision. In some regions it takes a year, and there, of course, again, the market is gone, the SME is bankrupt, everything is gone, but they take 12 months. In others, it's just 3, under the same rules. So what I think what we need to do here is really building capacities, and it's often the poorest regions which would take the longest because their administration isn't there, the capacities to deal with these questions is not there, and there we need change.
I like very much that you are referring to resources, to capacities of the poorest regions or the lagging regions, because if we move out from the legislative issues more to the strategic, the smart specialization. Smart specialization as a concept is evolving every few years. As an observer, but to some extent the participant of the system, I got an impression that there are certain fashions. There was a fashion for focus on research and technology, technology transfer as a concept, the commercialization built around this, right? Then we moved to the regional innovation strategies. Then there was an idea, and we still we live in the paradigm of the smart specialization strategies. Now, it seems that from the Commission, from some think tanks, the new concept of this transitional, it's not even hard to say it, this transitional smart specialization, transformative smart specialization. It's not too complex. Well, from the conceptual point of view and the way how you have to create this, the way how you have to build the partnership, how you have to get on board and engage different groups of stakeholders. It's not too complex.
Well, I mean, smart specialization was one of the first, I mean, for the non-knowledgeable people, it's again a kind of Commission aberration, even more difficult to express and pronounce than transformation. It's a regional innovation strategy. And for the first time, for many regions, we set the incentive that people set together, all the players, and thought what to do. In some regions that helped, and it usually helped in all, and we have a good track record, but it takes time. And I agree with you, there is a tendency of certain Commission departments and other who want to have a concept that is an explain all and solve all tool. And some of them moving into this. And when I looked and worked with the countries I worked with, and I saw the different strengths of regions, I saw that we desperately need to get away from this academic concept that a paper is the output. And this we tried to fix already this period with animating it, with having a governance system and so on and so forth. But we need to become much more practical. We need to be flexible because some regions, highly developed, they need the complexity. They can manage this complexity. But for the regions which don't have this capacity, and this is not alone administrative capacity, it's the universities, can they reach out? It's the enterprises, are they organized? Are they talking to each other? Are there cluster organizations which are working? Are there skills, vocational, educational institutes which are useful? So these kind of stuff is an ecosystem. And we need to go back to this ecosystem approach where we look at the strength of them, but make this mechanism and that we can implement it, that even the weakest regions can implement it and the strongest regions can do the complication they think they manage. And this is a little bit this kind of
I like to hear what you are saying, and I'm absolutely not in opposition. I'm very much in favor of this thinking that the maturity of the ecosystem should decide what kind of tools, what kind of strategy, what kind of concepts could be born there and how they can be developed and implemented. Thank you very much for sharing this idea. Moving to the very last point of the exchange of views, which I want to discuss with you, is the position of the cohesion policy versus the single market. Because in the time we are living with all this new global setup, with the new division of power, there are some people, or there's some reports, there are some think tanks that are promoting the concept that the cohesion policy is crowded out from the mainstream. So the mainstream at the moment is the security, economic transition, sovereignty, strengthening different dimensions of the sovereignty and security, not only in the military sense, but in economic sense, in energy sense, in human capital development and access to raw materials, all these issues under the same umbrella. Where do you think is the place for the cohesion policy for that? Well, is it still a streamline and the main policy of the Union, or?
Well, in terms of budget, it is, but the other part, yes. It is
the
in
new
the
budget?
center, and the new we shall see. But there is a place, because transformation, that's the topic here, but also competitiveness and prosperity. This is local, and you need to have adapted concepts to bring this up. So if we are talking about synergies, that means between, let's say, the central funds, which are looking at excellence, at the most competitive. They want to compete with China and with the US. We need to teach them and bring this to the Olympics. But we also need to look at the poor buggers which are sitting in the back of the class and sleeping all the time, to start with sports. And why? Because only if we mobilize these potentials, we as EU can really tap on this, and in a shrinking world in which we are currently living, tapping on our potentials is ever more important. And this is why cohesion should be in the center of the single market.
The very last question. If it's in the center, it means for you it will be centralized or not?
Well, we in Brussels always know better, that you know, right? No, of course not. That's my experience. We don't know better. What we need to do is we need to simplify much more. It needs to become much more straightforward. We need to be more flexible. That's an important aspect. But we also need to solve those issues which are not solvable by money alone. So if, let's say, I talked about local business conditions, if you are in a region which is not working in terms of business, then throwing money at them doesn't make sense. So we need a reform here. We need to talk to these communes or these parts of the country and say, please, do something. And then it makes sense. And here, do we know which regions are lagging behind in this example? No. So we are really there. We have to have the knowledge and mobilize the knowledge. And we heard this word hope today. And the hope of the people in the regions to say, well, I want to be rich, not in 100 years, but I want to be richer in 10 years, and how to do it. And that's hope.
And as we listen in the morning, the hope sells better than fear. Thank you so much, Wolfgang.
Sure.
It was great to have you here, and thank you for your contribution. Take a seat. Well, I hope you wake up a little, at least. And let's start the main part of the panel today. Let me introduce and invite to the stage Mr. Michał Kobosko, member of the European Parliament, active in the Industry, Research and Energy Committee and the panel for the future of science and technology. So all the topics and issues we mentioned already are in some... you have the privilege to choose the one you like. Michał Kobosko is an active politician. He was a chairman and the first vice chairman of the Polska 2050 party and a member of the Polish parliament. He's also very well known as a press journalist. So many years ago, we were in just opposite roles. He was the panel chairman and I was sitting as a director in the panel. So now I have this chance to revenge. But I will not. Yeah, I would treat it so kindly and so well. But Michał Kobosko was is a former editor-in-chief of several prominent magazines, including the Polish edition of Forbes, Newsweek, and the Polish title Wprost, as well as Dziennik Gazeta Prawna. He was also the director of the Warsaw office of the Atlantic Council. Welcome, Michał Kobosko, again on the stage. Then I would like to invite, I might say, a good friend, my very good friend, Professor Marina Ranga. Professor Marina Ranga is an associate professor on innovation management entrepreneurship at the University of Warsaw and the manager of the Ulysses Innovation Hub at the University of Seville. For over 2 decades, she is an advisor and expert for the European Commission, the United Nations, the European Committee for Europe, team of experts on innovation and competitiveness, policy, and United Nations Commission on Science and Technology for Development. Working for the European Commission JRC in Seville, she led or contributed to several projects on regional innovation and smart specialization and transformative innovation policies for sustainable transformation. You are the real researcher, and I welcome you very much because we really appreciate this research perspective on all these issues we are discussing. Next, if you allow me to invite Dr. Michael Jakob, Policy Director and Vice President, Policy Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering and Science. I'm very happy to have Michael here because we also met many years ago when I was in a different hat and we worked together in the European Research Area and Innovation Committee. Michael and me, we were members of the committee. And previously, Michael was the Science and Innovation Counselor at the Swedish Embassy in Tokyo and Senior Advisor to the Swedish Minister for Enterprise and Innovation. He also advised the European Commission and Council in Iraq, so we did it together. He has held position as a university and institutes of technology in Sweden and Switzerland, and leading positions at research institutes with close collaboration between academia, institutes, and industry. I'm very happy to have you here, and I believe that as a representative of Sweden, the country, the Nordic country with the high spendings on R&D, the strong entrepreneurship culture, but also with the very global view on Europe and the European competitiveness we've experienced from the Tokyo, Japan perspective. I welcome you very much in the panel. Let's applaud Michael. We have also two representatives from Poland, two more representatives from Poland. If you allow me, I will start with Łukasz Piekarski, the only one representative of the company here. Łukasz Piekarski is a member of the management board of the Vigo Photonics. I'm sure that everybody in the room knows Vigo. Vigo is one of these kind of flagship Polish companies, not unicorn yet, but I hope you are on the good way to do that. Łukasz Piekarski is responsible for investors relations, financing the company's development, as well as the company's investments policy. He cooperated with financing institutions such as the European Investment Bank and the EBRD, and also in the years 2006-2013, he worked in the Ministry of Regional Development. So to some extent, you feel here like in the family, I hope. Applaud Łukasz on the stage. And obviously, last but not least, for sure, Dr. Adam Mikołajczyk, Director of the Department of Regional and Spatial Development, the Marshal Office of the Pomeranian Voivodeship, previously headed the Department of Economic Development. He graduated from the Faculty of Law and Administration at the University of Gdańsk and holds a PhD in law. He specializes in the socio-economic development planning and the management of the EU structural funds. He's the author of the numerous publications on the subject. Welcome you on the stage, and this is the representatives of our regional dimension in the discussion today. I'm really excited and very happy to have you all here on the stage. I hope we created the right playing field, the ground for the discussion with the exchange of views with Michael. And as I mentioned before, we have three major topics, and I want to run this discussion around these three topics. So there are three major questions I want to pose to you. For each question, I expect a short information from each of you. If there will be more time before we change the topic, I have also the set of individual questions for you. But because there's a tight schedule, we have 1 hour and 15 minutes, I will be also the timekeeper, which is not a very pleasant role, but I have to do that. So please be as precise as possible, as bold, as visible with your ideas, with your thoughts. For the audience, to also give you opportunity to participate in the debate, in a certain moment in time, more or less in the half of the panel, there will be question posted on the screen. And we can use the same tool as we used during the main panel discussion, the Mentimeter. So you can scan it and you can answer the question. This is an open question, a little different than it was during the morning session, which means that you don't need to choose between the already prescribed answers, but you can provide your own thoughts. My advice is to provide short interventions, a word, or a short sentence or a phrase, because that's the way how we can create some kind of so-called word cloud. That will be a nice, there will be a nice way of summarizing your view, your thoughts on the concept and the question which will be presented later on. So, as we are starting with more global perspectives and this global dimension, the first question, obviously, is: does the EU still need the cohesion policy in the area of the global challenges? If yes, why? If no, maybe you can offer some arguments. What should be the support mechanism for the strong presence of the cohesion policy in the EU legal, conceptual, and strategic framework? And if I may ask, as a first speaker, Michał Kobosko, your perspectives of the member of the parliament, the Polish politician, person who probably understands very well this global context. I would like to start with you.
Thanks for having me in this panel discussion. I must say it's a pity that all these 5 panels are taking place in the same time, because it's not just the economy and green issues and digital issues. Everything is so much interconnected, interlinked these days that in a way it's a pity. I understand that the organizers will finally wrap up and combine all the efforts that we are doing in this panel discussions. Yes, I'm a member of the European Parliament. It's my first term. I'm a member of the European Parliament ITRE committee, which is dealing directly with the industry, energy, and the research and development issues. So we are all discussing these issues. And even though we are not saying that the green issues, the green revolution, if you like, are not important any longer. I would never say that, because we have the real climate change happening, and we cannot just forget it and say that we are throwing away all of the Green Deal, and we are forgetting about this. But as the previous term was very green in Brussels, if you like, this time it's the economy stupid. And definitely it's the economy and the competition and the competitiveness that we are discussing these days. And look, a few years ago, Emmanuel Macron was famously quoted as saying that the NATO alliance was close to the brain death. Well, whether it was true or not, well, definitely today NATO is not at this stage, and it's changed completely. With the EU, I would never say that we are close to the brain death, but the question is if we are not close to the death of the project because of serious changes and serious threats everywhere. I'm saying this as a politician, obviously, but we all know and feel and smell the changes. The external threats, starting with the war, real, full-scale war, which is happening just 200 kilometers from here, from this beautiful city of Krakow. We have the US and 10 days of the Trump administration, which is always already a bit of a shock to some of us, at least the executive orders that he signed. There are many external threats. The AI revolution coming from China recently, and so on, so on. But there are internal threats, and I can feel it every day in the European Parliament, because also the Parliament turned to the right, definitely. Some say to the extreme right. So we are hearing these voices every day that EU doesn't work as it's supposed to work, and we have to think more about the nation states, and so on, so on. All of this discussion of the Eurosceptics that is very visible, that is very loud, and people, our citizens, are listening to that, are hearing that, and they start to think, okay, maybe these people, maybe there's some right in this. Maybe we should think very differently in the 21st century. But that's leading me to the answer to your question. I mean, to put it shortly, cohesion policy is what makes Europe, Europe. That's our uniqueness. That's our huge achievement of the European project. That's something that we cannot let it go. We cannot let it happen less important to all of us, because this is what really touches directly our citizens, citizens of the European Union. They can feel European Union because they see projects funded by the cohesion policy.
And if I may pause you at that moment, because that's a very nice summary of this whole logic you presented, and just switch it to the entrepreneur, because from competitiveness point of view, to what extent cohesion policy builds your global position? Does it contribute to this, or it's maybe the centrally managed instruments are more important? What is the role, and why it's important or not important for the company like Vigo or any other deep tech company from Poland to use the cohesion policy or to use the centrally managed instruments? What's your perspective?
Well, it's not an easy question and not
absolutely
an easy
the
answer.
easy questions are already
of course, answered. I'm a big fan of cohesion policy, both as Polish citizen and also Polish entrepreneur, because we are, a huge beneficiary of cohesion funds. I mean, it took me less than 3 hours to get from Warsaw to Krakow yesterday, and we have really nice highway. 10 years ago, it would be more than 5 hours. As Vigo Photonics, as a deep company, we're also a huge beneficiary of a lot of funds for research and innovation, and it really helps. It helps with development of new technologies, new products, and new applications. So it's really important. But I think now it's the question: what are the priorities for cohesion funds? I mean, in Warsaw, I'm really proud to be able to observe how fast Warsaw is catching up with other European regions and other capitals. But with every financial perspective, there is less and less support for entrepreneurs for those fast developing regions. And can we really afford that? Because I mean, Michał Kobosko mentioned the AI revolution and this new model from China, and it provoked huge fall of the stock markets in the US. It also provoked a lot of comments from top US politicians. Mm-hmm. So President Trump described it as a wake-up call for the tech industry. And I'm wondering, why is it so quiet in Europe about it? Why why couldn't we afford to introduce such a model as Europeans? So now I think it's not the question to really create a completely level playing field among European regions. It's not a question whether Warsaw could compete with Eindhoven in the Netherlands. Now, I think the more important question is whether Eindhoven could compete with Hangzhou in China or Silicon Valley, or whether Warsaw could compete with Hamamatsu in Japan. This is the more important. We really need to find resources to support those, Olympic regions.
Champions.
Champions. Create some kind of innovation hubs. Because as a deep tech company, and it's purely egoistic of course, point of view, we need more clean rooms and less aqua parks.
Okay, thank you so much. What is the research perspective on this? Are there any good research arguments, evidence that the cohesion policy and the instruments of the cohesion policy contributes to the global position and the global competition of regions and companies? Marina?
Of course, for me, this is not a difficult question. This is an easy question, and probably the easier one among all those that I expect you to ask. I think if all the questions were as easy as this one. There are several dimensions here. If you look at cohesion policy per se, it was initially designed as an instrument to help European regions. So the global dimension was not necessarily, an intrinsic dimension of that. But you see the global dimension as soon as you project that in connection with the innovation policy on the one hand, and then with the trade, industrial and competitiveness policies on the other hand. If you take the research and innovation policies, of course, you have to think of all those research and innovation players that you have within the regions, and they are no longer confined to the regional or national boundaries. They are playing everywhere. They are playing or aspiring to play globally, as you said, if Eindhoven competes with Guangzhou or Shanghai or whatever. And then on the other hand, if you look at the industrial and competitiveness policies, the trade policies, of course you project that at a global scale. So the global dimension comes from the interplay of all this, this triad, which in my mind is very, very important: innovation policies, cohesion policies, and industrial and competitiveness. This is an essential triad for the success of our policies here altogether. And I would like to say one more issue here. I know that innovation has been qualified as one of the 9 enablers for competitiveness. I would say it's not just one of the 9, it's a sort of primus inter pares, if you want, because it cuts across all the others. And this is where you see this sustainable transition perspective, because that means sustainable transitions means a systemic transformation of all the systems that collectively make our society. You have the system of higher education, the system of health, the system of, so all these systems are benefiting from innovation development. So innovation is embedded in all the others and deserves this special recognition, not just one of the 9.
Super. Thank you so much. I'm just looking at Adam Mikołajczyk. Obviously, competitiveness is important for the region. But how you perceive the importance of cohesion policy in the global context? Because you, as a Pomerania region, you are in some sense of this, you are on the forefront of this globalization, as a city, as a region with access to the sea and this flow of products through ports. You are exposed to globalization and the global flow of goods. How you position this cohesion policy in the strategy of the region?
First of all, we all remember that 20 years ago, when Poland entered the European Union, cohesion, territorial justice, that was a topic that maybe not were gathering people on the streets, but it was important in public debate. Because the division of Polish plumber, of mechanics, was something important in the policy of political life in Germany, France. So there was an idea that it's worth to invest in the cohesion, and this common benefit was quite tangible. And now on the topic of the public discussion agenda is, of course, something else, like global competitiveness. And in that context, someone could ask what the regions which are playing important role in the cohesion policy have to do with that. And my answer is 10% of the answer is when we read Draghi report, he proposed a lot of interesting diagnoses. To some of them, he is trying to find an answer. But I also read some issues touched by Draghi's team without answer. For example, he shows the difference between top ranking of companies in the States and in Europe. The list, the ranking in the United States is a live ranking. There is a movement there. Some companies advancing, some are dropping out. In Europe, this top 100 of companies, this top 10 is very stable, very petrified. So we are very good in Europe in making excellence in the technologies we have already invented. Are not so excellent in finding new technologies, breaking technologies. And of course, the question is, for example, how excellence policy in Europe works. And this division between excellence policy and cohesion policy makes me a little bit feel a little bit uncomfortable, because maybe we are trying to achieve different results with the same, repeating the same means. For example, it's much easier for the big, rooted, traditional European company to get access to public financing in Horizon and different other initiatives, because they have potential competences, etc., services, advisory, etc. So maybe we are expecting from the elephant that he will perform breakdance on ice, and it's not possible physically. Maybe we should those actors, those companies somewhere else, maybe in the basements, in the garages. And in my understanding, those basements, those garages, possibly they are in the regions. When the regions have networks built, for example, thanks to the smart specialization strategy. But no, those networks are more or less empty or soft. They are not well connected, interconnected with financing. And I can imagine that the regions are working together with the national level and the European level in building some kind of synchronized support, some kind of lift for selected companies from the very bottom, from the very beginning to the very top. So let's try to think a little bit out of box without this strict distinction between excellence policy and cohesion policy. Of course, this is just an introduction to this way of thinking, 10% of details in which the devils are.
Yeah, but thank you very much for this perspective. If we just can travel over the Baltic Sea, from the Pomerania region to Michael to Sweden, the Swedish is the leader in many rankings of innovation. You are on the top of the European ranking. You are in many statistics and numbers. You are leading in innovation in all these indicators related to innovation. You definitely has a global economy. You are the part of the big global economy. Why the cohesion policy is still important for you, if there is, or how it could be used in the way that it will serve the regional or local needs and face global challenges?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here. I think with the Swedish position also, we need to be aware that Sweden was pretty a shitty country 100 or 150 years ago. So it's been the direction also that we have been trying to keep. We have a lot of, what's very good for Sweden is our big multinational companies that is, of course, helping a lot in the rankings and so on, but they do very different things today. than they did earlier. So this with re-innovating yourself is of course very important. And Sweden, you mentioned I was in Japan earlier. When I was there, normally Swedish people say that Sweden is a small country, but we are really not small. So when I was there, I usually told them that we are larger than Japan, but we have a population that is 1/4 of metropolitan Tokyo area. Still, we build our own fighter jet and also have a number of multinational companies. I think the issue also that you bring up here in the specialization, I think we will be all agreeing on the importance of cohesion policy, but also in trying to get the edge. Because right now the world is changing in a really increasingly rapid pace. So I think, for instance, the strategic technologies that the Commission has brought out, so on, and all of us should not do the same things, of course. So it will be very important here how we try to bring up an edge where we will compete with the rest of the country. For instance, the OECD's Science, Technology, Innovation Outlook that came last year. If you just check the curves there and see how the European Union is advancing, and I mean curves then in R&D investments, and just in monetary terms, I mean, the Chinese development, it is so scary in this context. So we really need to see how we in the European Union really focus on becoming good. I got a bit depressed today when a bit of the focus on the discussion is about hope and fear. I think we should try to feed in to all our citizens the possibilities. And I think also with the cohesion policy, we see now in the unease in the world, we have the climate changes that are in certain parts of the European Union. We have other parts, not least Poland, that is very close to unfriendly nations. We see also that it's a lot of innovation that can come from this. So I think we should try to cherish possibilities and try to bring out a positive approach around this. Bring out the edge and the possibilities.
Creates opportunities. Thanks. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Wolfgang, have you rest a little? So now I'm turning to you. What in the new mandate of the Commission is, what kind of novelty you can bring or can offer to the cohesion policy which fits to the debate to bring together the cohesion policy within the context of these global changes, challenges, and then the policies which are trying to strengthen Europe?
Well, elements are already mentioned. I mean, one part is that we are the only policy where on a regional, national level, actors sit together and plan and have a strategy where they want to be in 10 years' time. And this is unique. This enables structural investments. So you're not doing project-based investments, but you can look at your ecosystem, whether it's industrial or innovation, but the two anyway belong together. You can then identify components where you want to invest. And this is what no other policy offers. All the other policies are project-based. So a battery factory there, a steel factory decarbonized there. But they don't care about the region, about what is there and how this can be nurtured. And this is valid for the rich regions, which are very innovative, and for the poor, where we build up, and also for the other category where we need to wake them up. Because all of these need different investments, different approaches. And our evaluations show that, particularly in the most developed regions, these structural investments pay tremendously. They have an enormous economic value, even if our money there is very small. So this is something which we can offer, and this is something which is needed in this concert. And only if we tap on these local potentials, then we really can become competitive. Otherwise,
thank you very much. I think you touched an issue which naturally brings us to the second round of questions, the major topic of how to set priorities, how to find the right set of goals for regions, for nations, for union. I already defined this question in between lines of my introductory speech, but now I want to define this as a general question to all of you, to all panelists. What is the right approach to set goals and to set priorities, in particular through the lenses of this approach we already discussed with Wolfgang, this innovation strategies, regional innovation strategies. And because that's very much close to the regional approach and regional perspectives, I would like to start with Adam, with you. What's your view? Shall we build bottom up and focus on the regional strengths and weaknesses, and to build the strategies and look for priorities and goals bottom up? Or you are awaiting for how the big policies, how the big EU policies will be deconstructed and then the composition in the smaller pieces to be implemented in the region?
Well, let me give an answer which will be a little bit complicated. Because, of course, it would be my duty to say that we need in the regions freedom of setting priorities, and maybe we don't need any priorities, we should do what we want. But I will not answer it that way.
Thank you.
First, let's put the cohesion policy in the context, okay? Example of my region. My region is average, but for example, GDP of Pomorskie is equal to Tunisia, Latvia, Cyprus. So I think we have some cards to play the game on the field. But we celebrated 20 years in the EU, and we have made some kind of summary that this 20 years resulted in 40,000 projects, different types of soft, infrastructural, educational, full portfolio. And the value of those projects, 60 billions of zlotys, divided into 4 if you want to have it in euros. 60,000. 20 years of working of thousands of people in one region. Wonderful result. However, at the same time, the nuclear plant built in my region by Americans will cost, nobody says how much, but the calculations are between 150 billions of zlotys to 190 billions. I'm not saying it to diminish the meaning of cohesion policy. I'm saying this because we need priorities. We need to concentrate, because the scale is like that. Of course, this period, programming period, we're very strict, very rigid. Fulfillment of reports to the parliament that all the regions have more or less the same programs with the same proportions, same priorities. This is one bridge too far, maybe even 2 bridges too far. I think portfolio or this agenda of cohesion policy should be more or less, well, should cover all the issues that are important now. But regions should be encouraged to choose not the full agenda, should be encouraged to concentrate, but the selection of these priorities should be reflect regional policy. And what is important? What is important? We also have calculated that during last 10 years, 50 billions of public money came to the region. Half of them European, half of them national. This decision-making influence of the regional authorities on that money that more or less cover strategic priorities of the region is at the level of 12%. So this is the huge, should discussion about merging, interconnecting different levels of policy making, and I believe that region could be good place for coordination of different policies and gaining some kind of coherence at this level.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I just want to turn next to Łukasz, because I know that you as a company, the Vigo, you are extremely active in the ecosystem, in the regional ecosystem. You are also creating, in fact, the sectoral ecosystem. You are engaged in the Chamber of Commerce, you are creating clusters. The president of the company, Adam Piotrowski, is very active in a number of bodies on the national and regional and sectoral level. But you are in the scale of your activity, as a global company, in fact, do you prefer to build it bottom up, like Adam suggested, or you believe that you fit better to the big projects, to the big ideas, to the big goals of the European Union? What's your perception? Where's your place?
Well, this time the answer is pretty easy. I think we need both approaches. I mean, first of all, we need some kind of, clear vision and strategy and some level of stability and continuity. And I already mentioned that we are, a beneficiary of a lot of EU cohesion funds for research and development, and we apply for many projects. But it's like buying a lottery ticket. We never know whether we should be successful or not. We are competing, with waste management companies or agriculture companies or forestry companies. So perhaps there are, let's say, too many priorities sometimes, or they change too fast between the programming periods. So I think that regions should really, decide what are their focus, what are their priorities, and keep it that way. I mean, it took Silicon Valley like 40 years to create good conditions, and then those garage companies emerged. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, the regions should have some kind of freedom to set their goals and keep it that way. But not all matters can be dealt on regional level. If you are talking about global challenges, like for example now the problems with supply of materials, of rare minerals, this cannot be dealt on regional level. So we need to those regional policies to be complemented, but very fast, very flexible, and very agile central policies. I mean, Vigo is a beneficiary of the IPCI mechanism. IPCI stands for Important Projects of Common European Interest. This particular IPCI is on microelectronics and communication technologies. This is really a very good example what type of central policy should be, because this is very comprehensive. There is support both for R&D and also for investment in new production capabilities. And it targets not only the development of new products and applications, but it targets all areas of the value chain. So there is money for creating manufacturing capabilities, for development of new technologies, but also for equipment manufacturers and for securing the supply chain. So this is a very good example of how a comprehensive policy should look like. The only question is, why is it only for companies? I mean, we are entrepreneurs. We like this type of program very, very much, but it also should be complemented with some cooperation with regions. So there are no regions in this mechanism.
Magic instruments, you mean?
Yeah, and we could, there is a lot of synergies because, I mean, we need this ecosystem. In Poland, we created, we really invested a lot of effort and a lot of money to create this ecosystem. Ecosystem of different type of companies. We really have a very good cooperation with universities and academia, and we are now profiting from it. But regions could help us. There is a lot of synergies, and we will also need a lot of support and a lot of additional investment also from regions in this matter.
Thank you so much. That's very, very interesting input. And just move next to Mr. Kobosko, because you have this perspective of the member of the ITRE committee, but at the same time you are participating in this panel for the future science and technology. I'm sure you are debating there about priorities, about niche markets, about strategies for future technologies for Europe. Could you give us some flavor which tools or which mechanisms should be in that context of bottom-up and top-down discussion?
Look, it's still obviously the very first weeks and months of a new commission, of the new parliament. We are still in a kind of an initial phase, if you like. So I must say, I was more than happy that the new commission is delivering so far. That when President von der Leyen promised that during the first 100 days, they would propose very specific new ideas. That it's true, that is happening. With yesterday's publication of the competitiveness compass, with the clean industrial deal that's supposed to come in the late February, this is all happening. We have Draghi report, we have Letta report, we have Ninisto report talking about security issues. We do not have the lack of the reports and of the thinking. The real problem today is about the implementation. It's about implementing this idea and putting this huge paperwork, Draghi, Ninisto, Letta, altogether 800 pages or so, fantastic diagnoses and ideas. But now it's not a time to sit down and analyze even further. It's time to implement. So at the same time, I must say, I'd love to hear that Brussels, which doesn't always know better, is consulting with the member states, with the regions. And yesterday I had this mixed feelings when I heard von der Leyen and Séjourné presenting a competitiveness compass. It's great that they are coming with that just 60 days after the new commission started, but whether they were able to consult it with the member states, on the closer to earth level, what's realistic, what is not. Because we are always repeating the same things, that we have to be more innovative. We have to invest in new technologies, in AI. We have to have more students and to have to keep talents in Europe, because talents are leaving Europe for either westwards or eastwards. That's the problem today. So we know what to do. Just the thing is how to do it, and I can assure you we will be pushing hard, the Commission, the commissioners, to really implement and start delivering not only ideas, but the very specific projects. We'll be more than happy to come up with our ideas as a parliament.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Thank you very much for this. Michael, do you like more top-down approach or the bottom-up? How you make this real in practice in Sweden?
There is, I think, not a clear answer to this question. I think more, for me, it's more important to give incentives for people to bring out new ideas, bring out new concepts. In some cases, you may need a top-down, for instance, if you have global challenges that we really need to address. In other cases, and if I just look introspective in Swedish companies that have arisen, that have been quite successful, like Spotify or Klarna with economics, there's not been any top-down. It is more to try to give people the understanding of the possibilities that might be, and they will try to navigate in the system. But then again, for instance, to handle some of the challenges we have, climate. Actually, there was no one who asked anyone, I think anyway, to develop the messenger RNA technology that helped us at least shorten the COVID. So in that case, it's a bottom-up process. But I have, at the Royal Swedish Academy of Engineering Sciences, I'm chairing a group of people that represent all our different parts and also international. One of them who really boosted one of Singapore's most renowned universities right now, he usually says, well, bottom up is a bit like bottom stuck. I'm not sure if I agree completely, but I think you need a little bit both. But even more important is to try to give people the view of anything can be possible. So please bring it forward and help the world.
Thank you, Michael. Marina, you spent a lot of time working with developing, studying effects of the regional innovation strategies, the whole processes. What science could give us an answer or support the answer about how to set up the priorities, how to build the strategies?
I will give you an answer not just from the science perspective, but also from the practitioner's perspective. Because I spent many years managing programs within my appointment with the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. I've managed several programs on smart specialization, both S3 and then S4 and industrial transition, innovation-driven regional transformation. And one of the most important lessons coming out from these years of implementing smart specialization, where prioritization is a mantra, together with bottom-up, one of these big lessons was that there is never only a bottom-up approach. That was the original definition of smart specialization, a bottom-up approach to regional priorities defined by quadruple helix stakeholders, involving academia, industry, government, and civil society. So we learned that there was never a bottom-up only approach. There was a combination of bottom-up and top-down, which were meeting somewhere in the middle. Where that middle was specifically a matter of the characteristics of the region, because you have several factors that play here. You have, first of all, the strength and the smoothness of the relation between regional and national authority and EU, because you are in a multi-level governance paradigm. Then it's very much a matter of how should I put it? A matter of the centralized versus decentralized way of governing those regions. And this issue of centralization versus decentralization is not so much spoken about because it touches more on the political science than innovation policy. But we have seen, after years of implementing these programs, that centralized economies have initially had more difficulty in juggling all these requirements of smart specialization, whereas more decentralized countries, I'm talking Spain, for instance, which has 17 autonomous communities, were much more, or Germany, they were much more at ease in juggling with different programs, different instruments, different ways of approaching different stakeholders and so on. But here again, what is very important is to distinguish between the impact of this prioritization, because some of the stakeholders may benefit from a technology point of view, others may benefit in terms of access to markets, others may benefit in terms of organizational capacity, institutional capacity building, organizational progress and so on. And I would like to give here the example of the countries that were part of one of the programs that I worked on. It was the famous program of lagging regions that you are familiar with. And that was a program for over 30 regions in 9 countries, in southern, Central and Eastern Europe, which, as you know, they are the countries and regions that are more lagging behind. If you look at the innovation shape, performance in Europe, you have that banana shape with Northern and Western European countries and regions being more ahead, and then Southern, Central, Eastern Europe being more lagging behind. And we have seen that those countries that were more centralized, like Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, benefited from this prioritization and smart specialization in promoting and advancing the regional innovation systems or ecosystems, which were much less mature, much less established, just because due to the centralized nature of governance, the national dimension was prevailing over the regional dimension. We didn't even have regional innovation policies in countries like Romania or Bulgaria, and smart specialization became a regional innovation policy de facto, even if it was not recognized as such. But then we had countries like Spain, for instance, where you could have a very visible, very powerful effect of the different regions, the autonomous communities, which made absolute miracles in terms of attracting, absorbing funds. And here we are also talking about this absorptive capacity. And that also influences on the balance between top-down and bottom-up. There has been a lot of evidence in the literature that it doesn't matter to pour more and more money, on research and innovation in the expectation that you would get economic growth and competitiveness. And that is particularly true in the case of those regions that are, the lagging behind, the laggards. If they are sufficiently far away from the technological frontier, they will not be able to make good use of the money, the investments that are being made with them. And this pertains, it touches upon this performance model, that we have talked about. You can talk about performance, but what about those regions that are simply not, sufficiently strong to compete? And we are risking another Matthew effect here. Those who have will be given more. And that was one of the weaknesses of the research and innovation programs, and we are risking of replicating that in the cohesion, and regional development programs.
If I hear well, I think a lot of thoughts you just mentioned and provided in evidence from the literature, the scientific research, resonates in what you, Wolfgang, said already before, that we have different groups, that they have different needs, but also they have different capacities. I like this concept that different regions could go through the different mechanisms. Could you elaborate a little more to what extent the Commission can promote this approach, that the different groups of regions will be allowed to develop their strategies, to find the priorities on through the different mechanisms?
Yeah, I would gladly. One of the parts is, I think, one of the lessons learned is that we need to get these smart specialization strategies a little bit more practical. And there we took some lessons out of the Just Transition Fund. They have also a strategy which is a transformative strategy. In Poland you also have a couple of regions who are having this, where basically the stakeholders agreed on milestones and targets, where they would be and what steps should be taken. The lessons I took from the implementation of these regional innovation strategies is it all depends on the capacity. And capacity is key. And if one of the criticisms which we face is, you have this since 2 budget periods, and you see still the innovation gap is between the most innovative region and the least is 9 times. Where did you work? So we did work, but of course it's a dynamic world. The more competitive become even more competitive, and so it's about speeding up. And this has something to do that in the least developed regions we often found that the investments done have little to do what is in the strategies. So we need to move the two together. We need to build more than ever project pipelines, and we need to at an early stage, and we need to really build capacities of the actors. And this is not only the administration. Of course, the administration need to not preside 12 months on a funding request, but maybe just a month or two, which means a lot of reforms there, digitalization, different ways how to run the processes. But it's also the universities. If they are not able to reach out to stakeholders, to the regions, we need to bring them there. It's also about enterprises and their organizations. In the least developed regions, I often see that enterprises are not well organized. They have no voice. Then of course we need to look at business services. These are structural investments which we can do with a view on capacity building, and I think this is the most important what we need to do. And capacity building can also be something for the most developed regions. And then, if you allow me, then we are coming to this point where the excellence can really kick in. And excellence is necessary, because at a certain point we are doing basically the let's say the construction of the fundament, and on this fundament you can build excellence. And then what is also missing in this in Europe is the connection between, you have excellent research, and I think we are really good in this. But then what's happening with commercialization? There we are missing, and there cohesion policy can play a better role than it did in the past.
Michael, you raised your hand. You want to echo?
Just to echo, and one of the issues also, just connecting to Wolfgang here, is I think more and more now it will be a focus on, of course, strategic technologies, deep tech. Here it will be more important also with venture capital, and also venture capital that can survive a bit longer. So for instance, how we in the European Union use our pension funds and so on, and this was also in communication now, that can be very important to really see how we grow our next generation companies in the European Union.
Thank you so much. With this contribution, we've finished the second round of questions, and we have still time for the third one. I've noticed that some people already fallen asleep. I'm sorry for that. Some people left the room. So maybe that's a good moment to show up and pose the question on the screen. If there is anybody in the room who not yet used the Mentimeter to contribute to this discussion, I really appreciate if you can do that, because I need it. We all need it as your input for the discussion, as your input for the conclusion of the panel, the very end. So I think it's the right moment to ask again all of you here in the room to scan this QR code and to find your way of answer for the question. The third question topic which I want to discuss, as I already mentioned before, is more about the relations, how the cohesion policy can strengthen the single market, or the other way around, how the single market can help companies, citizens, industry to use more effectively cohesion policy for the prosperity of the whole European Union community. As the concept, maybe a little provocative question is the single market in its current form a relic, or it's still something which we can use potentially to stimulate the development of the European Union? If something is missing, like let us suggest this fifth freedom, what should be the purpose of this? What should be the focus of this? New freedoms, or the new approach and the new paradigm to strengthen the single market? As it is to some extent the kind of the political question, not only the contribution from the regions or from the industry is important. Again, I would like to start with Michał Kobosko, with the perspective of the politician, the member of the European Parliament, which is in the heart of the European concept.
Well, definitely, single market is not a relic, Definitely not, but it's not completed. It's very far from completion. That's the real problem with the single market. You don't have to read the letter report to understand how far we are today. Even though the concept started many years ago, we were able to introduce it in many areas, but there are lots of areas, including mainly the services, which are very, very far. You don't have to be a very experienced entrepreneur to know that things change from country to country, from member state to member state, different regulations, different certificates, different supervision institutions, offices, and so on and so on. That's just crazy that we cannot let it go because, for example, the services or the financial services, you mentioned the pension funds and how they are being used or they are not being used for the development of Europe, of our common future. That's the problem. We are comparing to the US, where you have a huge investments from the pension funds. On our continent, every country has different rules, different pension systems. Everything is different, and starting with the age of retirement. So that's the real problem, that we need to speed up the process of implementing firstly, in the services area, the single market rules, and I hope this is one of the key goals of the Commission. This is definitely what we will be working on, because without that, we might lose another point, another advantage of Europe. I said already that the cohesion policy is very fundamental to our existence in Europe and to keeping the support of the citizens, which is, we are discussing hope since this morning, and there is less and less hope, and people do not believe in Europe as they used to believe before. They are losing their hope. We need to get it back, and with that, we need to show that Europe is for something, is delivering, and the single market needs to be there also to help the cohesion policy projects to be further developed.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. You mentioned the importance of the service market as a missing element in the single market. What other components, what other markets or specific niches are necessary to be strengthened or to be introduced as the freedoms? Adam, how you see this?
I'm not sure if I will answer your question, because I do not understand that question. Because for me, it's difficult to talk about European Union without the single market. This is something like DNA. So,
yeah, but it's not completed, so it means that something is missing. So you don't miss anything. You are happy as it is.
I fully agree that the single market, how would it understand the average common sense man with the common sense, never has been delivered, implemented. I can give you one interesting, a little bit funny example. According to rules and procedures of cohesion policy, still in force, when preparing brownfields or greenfields for investors, we should be very careful to avoid the situation in which big company will be beneficiary of that activities. So, European Commission stands very firm to prevent from relocation of companies within the space of European Union. I understand this, that we will guard, we are guardians of the fence between Germany, Poland, France, etc. And the cohesion policy should respect these fences. However, this rule took a sort of energy to keep it last 10 years. Meanwhile, in the same time, we were very relaxed as Europeans with relocation of our industry to China and different other. So this is the single market in practice, reflected in priorities of cohesion policy. But let me continue just in a few sentences. Let's come back for the moment to this R&D policy. I absolutely understand that the scope of the region, this is not the scale in which R&D policy could be carried out in isolation. That's not what I meant. I meant that we need a system, synchronized, which is working together on different levels, not isolated policies at the regional level. Now we have total defragmentalization, no interlinks, as you mentioned that, no space for strategic planning of the development of the selected companies at the additional level. We learn to build smart specialization not so much about, around priorities, thematic priorities, more around networks and partnerships. And the thing is, how those regional partnerships could become a part of partnerships at national, international level, becoming a kind of value chains, new partnerships, new networks that will build new European economy. Another model, competitive model, is to nominate from the level of Commission. For example, Airbus, I will nominate you as a leading European innovator in space. And I will nominate you, company XYZ, as a leading European competitor towards United States and China in the field of something. So we have two models. In my think, we should mobilize all the reserves, all the energy, all the talents that we have in Europe. And that's why kind of decentralization, but within the system, this is the way we should at least try to use.
Thank you. Michael, you raised your hand, so you reacted for something specific, or?
Bit towards the fifth freedom now, what we actually package in this, because mobility is of course a very important aspect, I think, for the European Union, and trying to stimulate that people from our different countries interact much more. And it's, I think, within the research field, it may be easier than moving academia, industry, or so on. We're of course trying to push in Sweden also to move, to increase the mobility between academia and industry, but again, actually pensions and stuff like that may be a problem, but we are trying to incentivize the universities for meritation, for getting a professor's chair or so on. But for the European Union, if we really can try to stimulate also an increased mobility between our researchers and also with others, I think this will be very beneficial for all our countries. And of course, I mean, sometimes you hear a bit protectionistic views on that, and in Sweden also we lose, or what we should call it, number of people that go abroad. But I think in the long term, a lot of them actually return, but we also have incoming people from other places that will benefit the innovation system.
Łukasz, as a deep tech company, it seems that at the present moment you are just in the spot of the EU policy, the package of these initiatives presented yesterday under the compass of competitiveness compass. The name of the deep tech companies, startups, scale-ups, it's something which seems to be in the heart of these changes, in the focus of this package, also for easing the activity on the single market. What is the most missing from your perspective? What hampers your development on the single market?
Well, first of all, let me say that without the single market, I would be sitting in front of you, because we are also a beneficiary of a single market. Only like 5% of our revenues comes from the Polish market, and 75% from large European economies, so Germany, France, or Italy. So it's pretty easy to expand to those markets, and it's really good. I would really welcome even more single market, like for example in the finance services or in the military sector. It's something that is also needed for European companies, especially in the deep tech industry. But what's missing? I think that we are a bit too open. So Wolfgang mentioned that single market was created on the principle of level playing field, and in terms of European Union, it's okay. We have the level playing field, at least in some areas. But in terms of global, let's say, reference, the playing field is not level. We are competing with companies that are really heavily subsidized, the Chinese companies or American companies or Japanese companies. So, and the access to European market is really, too easy for them. And what's even more important, we are not preventing, what's flowing out of the European Union. So we are now losing our talents, we are losing our technologies, and we are losing our know-how. It's very easy to relocate our manufacturing capabilities abroad, and we are now, facing the challenges. And we helped our competitors to build their capabilities elsewhere. So now I think it's the time to change this policy and to be, more protective currently and to secure our achievements.
Thank you very much. Marina, now as an expert, experts in economic development, regional development, we are moving to the single market. Where we look for the places where we can unblock the regional development and strengthen this cohesion policy with a more single market?
Well, that question is really music to my ears, because just 2 months ago, I submitted my latest book, Single Market 2.0, to Springer, the publisher, and it will come out in March. And that's exactly the issues that I'm dealing with in my book.
I'm not allowed to promote your book.
So I won't say more about this, so it doesn't count as advertising. But even more so, I submitted that in August, and then the Draghi report came up in September, and many of the issues of Draghi report I already introduced in my book. So great spirits think alike, yes, I know. All right, so coming back to the single market issue. I think it's really an intrinsic, inherent, molecular link, if you will, between cohesion policy and single market policy. Because you retrieve benefits, and advantages of cohesion policy in all those 4 freedoms of the single market, and even more so in the systemic perspective. DG GROW has come up a few years ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago, with this industrial ecosystem perspective, which I think is a wonderful way of approaching the single market from a systemic perspective. Now, where we get into a bit of trouble is the definition of the industrial ecosystem, because it refers to some concentrations of technologies, but those concentrations of technologies do not happen in a void. They happen on a territorial, regional system structure, and they also happen on a technological system structure, on a sectoral system structure. So you see, when we are talking about industrial ecosystem, we have, in fact, an interplay of all these systemic, sectoral, regional, technological systems there. The question is, how do you manage that level of complexity? And sometimes we are perhaps too ambitious, trying to complete the single market, we have to accelerate things. Don't forget, the EU is not a single country. It's a conglomerate of 27 countries. And sometimes may not be, a realistic target to push to finalize some issue that take time, that need maturity to behave like a single unitary country. Perhaps these differences or these unfinished businesses about the single market still require more time, more reflection, more adjustment, more fine-tuning between the 27 countries and so on. And moreover, more fine-tuning between these industrial and regional and technological ecosystems at the level of policies, at the level of companies, the contributions of different types of players. And then you have the issues of convergence, of course. And we know what are the lagging regions. It's not a matter that we do not know where the problem is. And the funny thing is that you can have divergence, not convergence, even within the most advanced countries, within the single market. So, again, try to forge those win-win partnerships that at the end of the day will drive competitiveness across the single market altogether. And that's not always an easy business, because you have different profits, you know, that go to different pockets or different accounts. You have different resources, and then of course it's the issue, who is processing those resources when you have countries that have lost their processing power, and how do you share, distribute the benefits of all these resources on a national basis, on a regional basis, on an EU basis? Are we a collective power, or are we still a conglomerate of 27 countries?
Thank you so much. Very interesting. I think that your book should be kind of the obligatory literature for the future commission, I mean the present commission, the future discussion to stimulate the future debate. Thank you very much, Marina. Wolfgang, who has this privilege to always has the last voice. But now I really ask you to touch the sensitive issue, to touch the sensitive part of the European paradigm. Military sector, military markets, cohesion policy, common interest, single market, how you can bring it together? Is there any answer already for this, or this is still too far to say something?
Well, there's an advancement, but let me first say, well, these 14 ecosystems are really a big inspiration also for any future direction of cohesion policy in terms of innovation, enterprise support, digitalization, and all this conglomerate. It's quite useful. Yes, military is part of these 14 ecosystems, and indeed we are, as cohesion policy, there and treat the defense industry as any other industry. So here it is possible to fund and to support the defense industry. What we must not do, and this is a treaty obligation, we must not fund direct weapon purchases or procurement, and we also must not fund military operations. So all this we can do. We can also do military mobility. We do infrastructure, security infrastructure. All this that is then dual use. Dual use we do anyway. So there we are really standing ready to do it. But let me mention another aspect, and this is on the single market. These are value chains. Value chains and this new emerging geoeconomic conditions are becoming more and more important. And this is also where we have a small instrument, just a little bit of advertisement. You can say it's a policy experiment. It's something funded, 500 million euros. It's it's called I3. Innovation Investments Instrument. I'm always hesitating because I'm getting these and these are doing exactly that, EU value chains. With a cohesion perspective, we are looking at combining more developed regions, leading innovators with emerging innovators. We are creating these kind of value chains across the EU, and these are small projects at the moment, but currently we are thinking a little bit what to do with it. And I think there is space really for such an instrument in the EU instrumentation to really focus this kind of cooperation, to look at for the aficionados, higher TRL levels, so take something up, but then across the EU, and then bring also the different actors with their different capacities, with their different advantages in this together, and then get and bridge this innovation gap. That's also what we try to do. So another aspect for the innovation, for the single market.
So it could be a start of the new discussion, the new panel, but now it's a time that we are coming to an end. I hope that everybody in the room were able to scan a QR code and contribute to the discussion. If I may ask now, our technical support to show up with the, oh my God, the word don't turn out, because then you will see everything. Okay, there is many different contributions, but the largest words are regional driven approach, deregulation, cooperation, flexibility. I think they are self-explaining. Innovation is in the center, luckily. Oh, now it's a new concept. Somebody add probably the regulation, and the regulation, regional driven approach, and innovation, flexibility, smart specialization. There are the concepts which, in your opinion, are the answer for the question, what aspects of the cohesion policy are the key in the strengthening EU economic transformation? I think it resonates pretty well with the contributions from the panel. But to have a sharp, clear message from the panel, this is the last call, the call for action. This is not just about the theory, this is not just about how we understand there's different dimensions, but what we can do. What is your recommendation? One sentence, one thought, which you can summarize your all participation in the panel with the proposal for action. What to do, how to strengthen, because nobody questioned the role of the cohesion policy in the global context, in the regional context, in the single market context. So we believe that there is a lot of synergies. There could be a number of matching instruments between the regional cohesion policies and the economic transformation policies, even the security, sovereignty. So there is a risk of the overlaps as usual, but there is a lot of potential for synergies, for strengthening each other, and for matching. One action per expert. Adam.
Well, again, 20 years of experience, and we have in the region more than 300 companies. And for these 20 years, we have touched with grants, loans, different forms, 50,000 of them. It means we have to be selective. We have to have a mission which is ambitious but also somehow limited. But I wouldn't like to be with my colleagues in the position that we are building for our business some kind of ghetto. We would like to be a part of the solution. For example, investing in networks, in a partnership that can become a part of the large, broader value chains. At the national level, European level, just a moment. So we don't want to be a client for a horizontal program like that. We want to be a part of the system. So, 3 words. Selection, specialization, regionalization, more regions in all instruments, and finally, synchronization of different actions, activities that we are having.
Thank you very much. I was waiting for these 3 words at the end. Thank you so much. Łukasz,
yeah, I will continue.
Call for action.
From that.
Business person, you can make it.
I think we need to support, those champions. We need to support some innovation that creates the edge for European Union. So don't be afraid, to accept some level of divergence.
Thank you. Michał Kubosko.
I would say invest more, use more of the cohesion policy project to fund academia, to fund our universities, and specialization on our universities, because that's our future, our talents, and the future, and our future power of Europe when it comes to strategic areas such as deep tech, engineering, mathematics, and so on. So use the money which is on the table to invest more into our future.
Thank you. Michael.
And from my perspective, incentives for each individual to actually take the opportunities that are right now. We are in a transformative situation. There will be huge opportunities also to do something. So make sure that they can be done also.
Thank you. Marina?
I would say it's very important to make cohesion policy more agile, more capable and more flexible to respond to these very accelerated changes that we are witnessing these days, and moreover, to better respond to the needs of the people, as the Polish minister was saying, to make it logical rather than ideological.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, as usual today in my panel, Wolfgang.
Wait for autumn.
Thank you so much. Thank you, audience, for an active participation. Thank you for being active in this Mentimeter experiment. Thank you all and each of you. You did a great job. You did a great contribution to the conference. Oh, my God. You did a great contribution to the discussion about the cohesion policy in all these contexts. So it's also the big contribution to the Polish presidency event. So thank you very much. Thank you, Adam, Łukasz, Michał, Michael, Marina, and Wolfgang. Thank you. We started 4 minutes later, and we finished 4 minutes later. We're just in time. Thank you. Enjoy the evening. Enjoy the weather. Today, I was told that today is the last day of spring this winter. But there is still hope. Spring will come again.